So today I'm responding to Julio's claim that downloadable content and microtransactions are necessary for the video gaming developing industry. And his three claims were that with the rising development budget of games, the selling price is no longer as effective at covering the costs. The second one was that advertisement is extremely crucial to video games because it is a growing industry with a lot of competition. And the third claim was that most video games are no longer just an offline experience. Longevity is now an important factor in video games because of online communities. My first response to his claim is that he claimed that from the 1990s to now, the budget of video games has increased by a factor of 30, but the selling price of these games has only doubled, which is true, but a study from the Video Game Statistics by the Entertainment Software Association claimed that in 2009, 25% of Americans over the age of 30 played video games as opposed to 9% in 1999, showing that whether or not the prices of these games do keep on increasing, the number of consumers are increasing steadily. So the budget has had to increase given that there's a significant increase in the number of consumers of these products, and the same association had an article saying that the average video game player is 35 years old, and that the average player has been playing for 12 years, showing that they're most likely going to keep on playing if these trends do tend to continue, whether or not the downloadable content is implemented into these games. His second claim was that advertisement is extremely crucial to video games because it is a growing industry with a lot of competition. And my response is that although the speaker did back up the claim that advertisement costs a lot of money on top of actually developing these games, the speaker did not elaborate on how this could be avoided by using the downloadable content. And the video game industry is a growing industry, and as of now, although there are people complaining about the increasing selling price of these games, there aren't that many people that are swearing off these games completely. So although the prices are increasing, more and more people are continuing to purchase these games, showing that the video game developing companies aren't necessarily being negatively affected by the increasing prices. And there isn't really a huge outrage going on about the prices of these games since the prices have been steadily increasing instead of suddenly spiking up. And his third claim was that most video games are no longer just an offline experience and that longevity is now an important factor in video games because of online communities. And it may be true that these companies don't have high success rates right off the bat, but that's not only true for just video game companies, this is true for almost every business venture. And the speaker didn't really mention any statistics of the economic side of things or talk about the negative effects that the video game companies are facing due to the higher selling prices. And there was no information about the fact that there are any protests or anything that the video game fans are conducting because of these prices, showing that although the selling prices have been increasing at a slower rate than the budget of these games, there isn't really any negative effects to not having any microtransactions or downloadable content. Thank you.
All right, everything's set up at the beginning pretty clearly to follow. I like the first point where you're talking about the estimate about the number of people who are playing the games. And so although prices have gone up and their costs have also gone up faster than the prices have gone up, I think you have a legitimate argument to make here that their market has expanded substantially, and that's one of the reasons that they've done that. I think there might also be an argument to suggest that the companies themselves have made a decision to keep the prices relatively low in order to accelerate consumer demand on this. And so if it's a wound, it's a self-inflicted wound that's designed to continuously draw in a marketplace. I like when you have that statistic that talks about the average age of the player and how long they've been playing. That seems to suggest that there's a long-term market for these sorts of things. And did the advocate suggest any reason to believe that these markets would die off without the added materials, the microtransactions and downloadable content that were described? I think that that's a reasonable challenge to make. If there continues to be expanded use of these things and the average age of the players increases, that seems to suggest that this hasn't had any big impact here. On the second point, I think you've got a very good question here. How does this reduce their advertising costs? There's no explanation of it in the advocate's argument. That's pretty reasonable, except that I guess it's an extra revenue stream that they can get. One of the things that I think you might point out is that there are additional revenue streams that don't necessarily have to require microtransactions and downloadable content. Those might be the easiest sorts of things, but I imagine there's ancillary products that people, like T-shirts, buttons, sweaters, cosplay, all that kind of, franchising. Hey, doesn't cost you anything to sell the rights to your video game to some movie company who then assumes all the risk to make the movie, and if the movie pays off, you get a big chunk of change that didn't cost you anything. I think you can point out that this idea that there is no other revenue stream other than these things, that's the problem here. So you're on the right track on this point. I just think that you needed to go a little bit deeper on that particular point. And then on the third point, basically there's a challenge to the absence of evidence on these sorts of things, that there's no information about protests, there's no demonstration that any harm has occurred. One of the things that I think this is another place where a little bit of additional research would have been helpful. How much more is the market expanded? And one of the things you might look at is the companies that are producing these things. How many more jobs have been created in this industry? How much bigger has this industry gotten in terms of total revenues? Is there a growth estimate about future jobs? Every time I turn around, I keep hearing this is the future of the kind of stuff that a lot of you guys are doing here. The programming and all that kind of stuff. This is where the jobs are all going to be. Well, if that's the case, it can't just be because the micro transactions and digital downloads, or maybe it is. I don't know. All right, thank you.